Welcome to Leaders of Today. My guest today is Dr. Jennifer Edwards, a veterinarian, leadership and energy coach, and speaker who has built her entire life around one core belief. When you learn to lead yourself, everything else becomes possible. Her path started early. As a teen navigating the absence of her father and a mother working full-time, Jennifer and her sisters learned to raise themselves. Amid the insecurity and the lack of guidance, she had a defining moment. The realization that she could trust her own awareness and intuition to guide her forward. That inner leadership carried her through building and selling a multi-million-dollar veterinarian practice and into a new chapter focused on mindset, energy, and conscious leadership. Today, she helps professionals rise above overwhelm, turn to their inner compass, and create lives grounded in clarity and purpose. In this conversation, we'll explore how her teenage experiences shaped her resilience, what she wishes teens knew now, and how understanding yourself at a young age can change the entire trajectory of your life. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from teens to titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Connell, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Welcome, Jennifer. So glad to have you tonight.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Excellent. So, as I said, I ask all of my guests this question. Go back to the teenager that you were and share some of the experiences, some of the learnings that you had during this time in your life that you think may have contributed to the leader that you are today.
Well, as you mentioned in the intro, as a little child, before I was a teenager, my parents got divorced. When I was about 10, we stopped really having any relationship with my father. And my mother worked full-time. So as a result, I grew up as a teenager very independent. In fact, that's an understatement. I pretty much raised myself for the most part. I was provided a home and all the essentials. But outside of that, I was pretty much on my own. And when you're a teenager, especially back then, there's a lot of ways that you can get into trouble. There's a lot of things you can go off and do, and nobody's giving you a curfew or asking where you are. And it wasn't right away that I was aware of it, but I had the teenage Jennifer who, wanted to go out and probably do things I shouldn't have. But there was this other part of me that was also always there with me, almost like was watching out for me, kept me two steps shy of ever actually getting in trouble. I always did well in school. I never, got in trouble. I was a good kid, on the surface. But of course, like a lot of teenagers, I had a rebellious side. But I always had, it was like that one eye open that something was watching out for me. And I would be in situations where other people might say, hey, let's go do this. Let's do that. And I was like, nope. Like I just kind of always knew when to step out of a situation to really keep myself safe and keep myself from doing anything that might not serve me or get me in trouble. So somewhere along the way, and I don't remember exactly how old I was, I don't know, 14, 15, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed and all of a sudden I just had this thought, or more like a feeling of gratitude. And I thought, wow, I'm so lucky that I have me to go through life with. And it was in that moment, even I didn't have the words for it like I might now, but it was in that moment that somehow I knew that there was the human mind part of me going through as a teenager, all the stuff, the stories, the insecurities, the adventure, the rebellion, but that there was the true me, the higher self me, and that higher self me was me, and that no matter what, I always had me to count on. So, and I know it sounds a little bizarre, but that occurred to me at a very young age. And again, I didn't have the words to say it, but it was just a knowing that I had.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I so often the teens that I end up working with are in need of a lot of self-confidence and understanding that their voice really does matter. And so often it comes from this place of not really knowing that they have themselves or not really liking themselves. And so often we'll hear about people who have these voices, that are really ourselves and subconsciously telling ourselves, like, you can do better, you're not enough. And so I'm curious, did you ever have those negative thoughts of like, you can't do these things? And so I don't want to put you on the spot like that, but
Yeah.
it's curious to me that so many of us are struggling with the opposite belief and thought of like, I'm so lucky. We're over here thinking like, I wish we knew or we had a different person to be going with.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a yes and kind of answer in that, yes, I did. And honestly, all these decades later, still do have very similar stories, insecurities about myself that everybody else does. So I can't emphasize enough how normal that is.
Mhm.
And for us to, in some way, feel that we're not good enough, we're not likable, we're not smart enough, we're not cool enough, we don't matter, fill in the blank, some version of that, pretty much we all have. And especially in adolescence, those stories are running rampant because we don't even know what to do with them. As we get older, we learn to kind of coexist with them. But when we're teenagers, these things that are going through our head, boy, they really seem like the truth.
Yes.
Right? And they're not the truth. They're just stories our mind is making up based on comparisons and all the things and things that might be being said to us or not being said to us. But having that's like where our minds are kind of living every day. That doesn't not negate also having that higher self to look out for us, because underneath all of that humanness, I like to call it, as humans, we have minds and our minds make up stories and we think and we compare and discern and judge. But beyond that, we also all have, depending on a person's beliefs, whether it's a spiritual side, a soul, a higher self, whatever words resonate for somebody, there's no truth there. It's, just semantics, that there is what's either above or underneath, however you want to look at it. That's really who we are.
Yeah.
And all of those other things, while they feel very true, all the stories, they're true to us in the moment. Like it's our truth with a lowercase t, but it is not the truth with a capital T. So, one thing I like to emphasize, especially to young people, is all of that is normal. Like there's nothing wrong with you for thinking and feeling that way. And it doesn't mean it's actually true.
I'm so grateful that you brought up the stories that we tell ourselves and the lowercase truth versus the uppercase truth, because that's so prevalent in our lives. I think the realization that what we believe to be true is not always capital T true. And I love that you brought that up. I think that's really powerful.
I think the vast majority of what we believe to be true is, it's not that it's not true. It is just not like the truth. It's like there are certain things that are just the truth. But I think part of what culturally ingrained in us, and more and more and more so every day, is this idea that what our minds perceive or make up or interpret is the truth. And more we see lack of tolerance or exploration of other people's truths. I'm right, you're wrong syndrome. And what's really interesting is when people will, fight tooth and nail that their truth is true until they see that one piece of information that was missing and they go, oh, now I see. Well, what was true in one moment, now all of a sudden a moment later isn't true. I always say everything's true until it's not, right? And so it doesn't mean that you have to not believe yourself or doubt everything you think. It's just perhaps not holding on to things in ways that are detrimental, in ways that have you think poorly of yourself, poorly of others, or hold you back in any way. But again, it's easier said than done. It's just, I guess the first step is being aware that this is even happening.
Yeah, it's that awareness. And you alluded to it a little bit earlier about it was just keeping you safe or two steps away from making a decision that could have changed the direction. And I was curious, you say you have sisters. Are you the oldest?
No, I'm the youngest of
You
three.
were the youngest. Even more fascinating because those tendencies, those behaviors, you'll see very often in an oldest. And so I'm curious, as the youngest, did you also see things that potentially your sisters and siblings are doing that allowed you to have more information about what to do in certain situations?
Somewhat. My sisters were both wild childs in their own way. And I did observe we were all so different from each other. There was never any kind of a tendency for me to be like them in any way, in the way they thought, in the way, the image that they chose during adolescence. And we were just very, very different. But at the same time, I did learn. That's another thing through my whole life is just this idea of not having to recreate the wheel. Why make mistakes that other people have already made? Not that we don't make our own, because that's part of our journey. Of course, we all make mistakes and that they're needed for growth. But at the same time, we can observe and pick and choose from what we see. Like, I like the way that person did that, or I don't, or maybe I'll try that. Or sometimes, even though that didn't work out for that person, I might do it differently. I'm going to try anyway. Like, that's okay too. But really just observing others with discernment of what do I want to emulate? What do I not want to emulate? And I definitely did that with my sisters for sure. I had them ahead of me, kind of paving the way.
Well, and I think that's a really interesting learning that you were able to have and apply. And I'm curious to know if you took that sort of like observation of learning from other people's mistakes, making your path and your choice your own, if that came out as you built your incredible vet clinic, do you think that that piece of like being okay watching other people make mistakes and then making your own and sort of navigating those experiences, did that come out in the building of that business?
Absolutely. Because I was living in Northern Virginia for a couple of years, and then I moved to New Hampshire after I got out of veterinary school. And my first 2 years in Northern Virginia and in New Hampshire, I did relief work, which is per diem. So I worked in a lot of different practices, and I was able to observe a lot of things, a lot of what I liked and a lot of what I didn't like. Then I took a job for 5 years at one practice and then left and opened my own. And so what I walked into this process of creating from nothing, creating an animal hospital, was a lot of ideas of what I wanted to do, a lot of ideas of what I didn't want to do. But bigger than that was a vision of not so much the what's, like I want to do this and I don't want to do that. I mean, that was logistical stuff like forms and software. And the bigger driving force for me was it was a vision of an experience. And I had in my mind, and this is back, I created during the year of 2006. I opened in the beginning of 2007. So this is quite a while ago. It was a vision of an experience of what it would be like to work there, what it would be like to be a client there, what it would be like for an animal to be a patient there. And I just had this idea of what I believed veterinary medicine could be. And I set out to create it. And, it was very focused on integrity and like honoring our word. It was very focused on thoroughness, high quality, gentle, loving ways of handling animals. And everything just kind of revolved around that. So all of the what's, all of the things that had to be created along the way, and there were lots and lots of them, I can tell you, but they all were created inside of that context. Like it had to fit this vision that I had, or it didn't belong. So yeah, and there were a lot of mistakes along the way, of course, and things I look back now that I might have done differently, or things I didn't know that I didn't know. But that's all, again, the mistakes are part of the journey. The mistakes are part of learning and growing, both in business, but also just as a person.
Yeah. I love the idea of recognizing that you had a lot of hats to create the experience and the clinic that you wanted. And so being in all of those spaces before you built the clinic or created the space that you wanted it to be was a lot of reflection. And I'm curious about the independent streak that you had as a young teenager and also building this clinic, like how did you navigate wanting to be independent, but also like wanting to have a team and things along those nature?
Yeah, it's interesting because while I was part of a team, I also was the leader of that team. And I wasn't just the leader, I was the owner. So I was the owner, the entrepreneur, the CMO, the CEO, the doctor. And the moment I was just doing surgery or seeing appointments, I was in the role of doctor. I still was being the leader. And that independent streak, I think in some ways, if I were to see how it held me back, would be as I reflect and how I probably would do things differently, not probably, I would do things differently now, is I kept maybe a little tighter control on things than I needed to, maybe a little touch of micromanaging. But in general, the independent streak worked because I was independent. Nobody told me what to do. People suggested, of course, and I was very open. We were very collaborative as a team. So it wasn't like my way or the highway kind of a situation. But still, at the end of the day, there was nobody telling me what to do. And it's interesting because I do see that little thread that runs through me. Like, I have no problem following rules, following protocols, but there are times when I'm like, no. Like when you're somewhere and somebody's trying to tell you what to do for like no reason. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. There's that streak in me, that little rebel teenager comes out like, you're not going to tell me what to do.
And how did that transition you to seeing that you were done with the clinic and it was time to sell it?
Well, that came more as, okay, so we're going to circle back to, well, anybody, but especially young people that would be listening, is to really starting to cultivate that connection with your deeper, truer self, because that deeper, truer self who's in all of us, whether you have zero awareness of it or partial awareness, it's there and it can be cultivated and brought out. But that guide is invaluable and that guide will never lie to you if you trust and you listen. And so selling my practice came more as an intuitive hit. Like every big decision in my life that I've ever done has come in a moment, in a second, in a flash of a message. And selling my practice was no different. I spent all of the spring of 2019 trying to buy a building. I was in a leased space and I wanted to buy a building to move my practice. I was going to spend probably $1.5 million building it out. Would have been committed there for another 5 to 10 years at least. And everything I tried to do fell through. It was unbelievable. I tried to buy buildings that were on the market for years and they're like, they decided not to sell. And then August of 2019, I just got this like, sell your practice, this message. And I've always listened. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, could I do that? Like all of a sudden there was this like relief because I was kind of burning out.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're already part of something bigger. You're part of my advocacy team. Leaders of Today and Peers Not Fears exist to amplify voices at the age when so many of us were having moments that shaped who we became, sometimes in silence, sometimes without support. These conversations are about what happens when voices are heard earlier, when leadership is named, and when young people are reminded that they matter. As we move from building these programs to sharing them more widely, my ask is simple. Help us carry these stories forward. Share an episode, talk about the work, pass it along to someone who works with youth, supports teens, or believes in the power of early leadership. Because when we normalize telling these stories and believing in young voices, we don't just change individual lives, we change what's possible.
And I got in action, long story, won't go into all the details, but ultimately I closed on the sale of my practice on January 29th of 2020. And 6 weeks later, I found out why I got that message because we were knee deep in COVID. And from that moment, the entire profession changed. It is not the same. Veterinary medicine is not the same place that it used to be. And it's different. And I'm going to say it's good, bad, right or wrong, but it definitely is not where I would want to be right now as a practice owner personally. And, listening to that inner voice can be the biggest gift we give ourselves.
Yeah. And I think I'm so grateful that you're bringing that intuitive piece up because you're not the first intuitive that I've interviewed. And I think there's so many of us who dismiss the intuition as like, that's just, me being wild and me thinking like this crazy thought, but like leaning in, trusting the courage that it took to really believe in yourself is incredible. And I would love for you to share a little bit more on like maybe some of the little things that allowed you to start. I mean, you talked about sitting on your bed and being like, okay, I got this. I'm going to be okay because I get to live with me. But what were some other experiences that maybe your intuition helped guide you?
Well, are you referring to when I was young or just any time in life?
I guess anytime, but yeah, maybe in your younger years, that would be really great. Because part of the experience that I share when I'm talking to adults is that we really do silence the intuition of so many of our teenagers right around 16. You know, that's when you have to like decide what you're doing for the rest of your life, where are you going? And so often they're like, I don't think I know, but we keep asking, keep asking. And so we're sending this message that you must know. And so I have a child who is like 18 now, and I'm like really trying to hold that back. Let him figure it out and listen to that intuition and not silence it. So if you can think of some teenage experiences, I would love that.
Absolutely. Well, first, part of the silencing of intuition is this like fear of making a wrong choice. So, one of the things that's so important to remember is that there are no wrong choices. When we find ourselves in a situation because of a choice that we made that is not working for us, all that is another opportunity to make another choice and to learn and to grow. It's not failure. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not bad. It's part of life. But it's this part of life that for some reason culturally over generations, we have shamed and we have suppressed. And so now there's this fear of doing the wrong thing. You mentioned your son in college, and my daughter's 15, so we're almost there as well. That's one of the biggest areas for young people to allow. I went to Virginia Tech undergrad. I started out in engineering. I switched to business. I switched back to engineering. I got a degree in psychology, and then I went to veterinary school. Okay. And being a veterinarian was 100% what I was meant to do in this world, in this life. If I had not taken that circuitous route, I never would have landed there. But because I was so open to just allowing myself to flitter around, and if I hadn't happened to live in a town that had a vet school, I probably wouldn't have even thought of it. So it was just allowing things to unfold the way they were meant to unfold. And yeah, there were people who were like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really know. This sounds good. I went to engineering because my sister was in engineering. Okay. Like I had no clue. But when you can make choices, it's not about sitting on the couch watching Netflix for 5 years until you figure it out, because you're not going to figure it out that way. But by living and starting to make choices and seeing where those choices lead you, you can then say, okay, well, here I am now. I'm in this major. I hate it. Well, okay, then what do you like? Or, oh my God, this is great. I never thought I would have liked this and I love it. Or I took a class and this is how I ended up in vet school. I took a class in geology, thought it was cool, and then realized I probably would never make money as a geologist. And then I took in the psychology department a class in animal behavior. And my professor was so great that I was like, I want to do this. And then there was a vet school there. And I'm like, well, if I want to work with animals, I may as well just go to vet school. Like it was literally like that's how I ended up in vet school. So I always like to say, a sailboat wants to go from point A to point B. And when they're under sail anyway, there is never, other than fleeting moments of transition, there is never a moment where the sailboat is actually pointing where it wants to go. It points to this way, and then it points that way, and then it points back. And so life is a circuitous route. And when we allow that, when we trust and we see what's feeling inside of us, like when something excites us, not being totally irresponsible about it, but also not being contained by endless reasons why nothing will ever work out, is going for it and learning and growing and trusting yourself. One thought I always have too is when people have a hard time really listening to their intuition, sometimes it can be hard to discern intuition from fear. Is this not meant for me? Or am I just afraid? Because we don't want to get held back by fear either.
Right.
So sometimes it's also learning to sit with that and really, again, it takes practice, but starting to really feel into like, what is this feeling I'm having? Is it fear? And if it's fear, what's underneath it? Is it a story because I don't think I'm good enough? I'm not smart enough. People like me don't succeed, like whatever. Or is it truly a gut feeling like something's off here? Those are very different experiences, but without paying attention, they can feel the same.
Yeah.
But the big word here for me is allow. Just allow yourself to live, allow yourself to make choices and have them not be the right ones.
Yeah. One of the key phrases that I'll say to them is that there's no right or wrong. It's only next. And it's never a binary, right? If it's not wrong, it doesn't mean it's right. And if it's not right, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And so I allow, what a great word. And I've never heard the sailboat analogy. I think that's fantastic. It is so hard for parents to allow when they feel so, maybe it's tied to the financial structure of what comes next, the belief that if our kids don't do this, then it's somehow a representation of us. The challenge of like, well, this is what I did. I don't want you to do that, or I want you to do what I did, or can I relive my life through you? And so there's so many factors at play, and I feel it's very, very challenging to be a teenager right now. And I think you're really lucky that you were able to recognize that it's okay. The path doesn't have to be direct. And I love that you were like, being a vet was 100% what I was meant to do.
And it was a very windy, curvy road getting there.
Yeah. And that's half the reason why I do this podcast is so many people can remember the path that it took for them to get to where you are today.
Yeah. And the other thing too, to keep in mind, and this is for young people, because again, your life at any moment is, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, it doesn't matter. The metaphor I like is, you're sitting in a bowl, and the bowl is what you call your life. All the circumstances, the people, the relationships, like all the things, your clothes, like everything. Like you're in your bowl, you look all around and there's your life. And your life today is not going to look the same as your life 10 years from now. But the life that exists is the culmination of a series of choices throughout your whole life. And those choices lead to outcomes, sometimes the ones we expect, sometimes the ones we didn't expect, but the outcomes create your life. When you can bring intentionality and awareness and consciousness to your choices, you can better have an influence on those outcomes to create the life that you want. However, all of that and everything we said about intuition and all of these things does in some ways also require quiet. And the one thing I did not have as a teenager, a lot of things we didn't have, but one of the biggest things I did not have is a cell phone. I did not have social media, right? And so all of that noise, and one of my biggest concerns, our culture never promoted the development of self-awareness and intuition. Right. And even now more than ever, it's being hampered because there's never quiet mind time for many teenagers. And so in order to hear your own self speak to you, you can't have a whole lot of other things speaking to you all the time. All this quick TikTok, The young minds are being trained into constant distraction and need for distraction. And so it can become very difficult to learn to just sit and do a puzzle or read a book or color or go for a walk without your phone and your AirPods in. And because those are the moments when that comes to you. Those are the moments when all of a sudden you're like, I don't know how I thought of this. I just got this idea. I was out walking the dog and I thought, blah, 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 right? Or I was going to take that summer job after, at that summer camp. And I don't know, like I was just taking a shower the other day and I got this feeling like there's something about it. There was something about that guy that it rubbed me the wrong way, right? That's your intuition. And sometimes when we first start to learn it, it's in retrospect. Mm-hmm. So when something happens and you say, darn it, I knew it. I knew there was something about that guy. I knew as soon as he asked me out, or I knew there was something in that interview when that guy said something that I just got that icky feeling. That's your intuition. So in the beginning, don't beat yourself up. Don't make yourself wrong. Just start to notice where it happened and you ignored it because you just didn't know. And not from like, oh, I'm such a jerk, I ignored it, but more from an awareness like, oh, I see that I actually had that gut feeling. And next time I get that gut feeling, I'm going to pay more attention, right? That's how we can start to become aware of how it shows up, because we're all different, right? And how it shows up. But the more we focus on it and the more we pay attention, the more it will expand. And I believe my truth, maybe not the truth, but my truth is that every single person, or at least almost every person, has that and has the ability to some extent to make it more prominent in their lives.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is the truth because, you'll catch a lot of people saying, like, I thought about not doing that and I should have just not done it, right? It's like all of those pieces. And I love the retrospect because that is really key. And we talk so often about the red car. You probably know this, but like when you buy a new car, all of a sudden you start seeing that car everywhere. It's because you're paying attention, right? Now you know this car. So if you're looking for the times where you're telling yourself something, if you're paying attention, you'll see it happening more often. The more often it happens, paying attention to which direction you go, what is the evidence starting to compound? And I love that we're going in this direction because I think it's such a critical thing to pay attention to what your inner and yes, the quiet, the discomfort. I talk so much about the zones of comfort and that discomfort of being in silence. We just don't love it. And so that discomfort, that's where we're being challenged and we should be leaning into those things. But instead, we want to codify and eliminate that discomfort. And so the downside also of not being in that discomfort is that we're also not growing and learning for ourselves.
Right. Well, the irony is that, like so many things in our minds, it's the exact opposite. I can't tell you how many times I'm coaching somebody about something that's really for them like a thing that's affecting their life in such a big way. And when we break it down, it's simply a matter of flipping it upside down and the entire narrative changes. And it's just like, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. And this is one that I think it applies is the whole comfort and discomfort, because the irony is that people want to stay in their comfort zone. Yes. When the comfort zone is actually very uncomfortable. I mean, when we think about the struggles and we think about the social problems or the self-criticism or the friends and the teachers or the boss and like all the things and everything in life that's so hard, yet we don't want to do anything about it because we don't want to step outside our comfort zone. Like, what? That's comfort? What? You're miserable every day. That's comfort? And then yet something like sitting with quiet, sitting with yourself where nothing bad can happen to you is the discomfort zone. It's complete inverse. Somehow we're like programmed into this story about this. Yep. Again, it's societal norms and it's just how we're raised. And it takes somewhat of a desire and an intentionality to step outside of that and go, oh, wait a minute, you're right, that doesn't make sense. So if something's not working in your life and something's making you not happy to whatever extent, especially whatever stage of life you're in, how much choice you have, think about like, what might it take for me to make choices that might change this? Maybe you have to actually stop being friends with somebody. Maybe you have to stop hanging out with a whole group. When I was a sophomore in college, I literally stepped away from my entire friend group I had cultivated my freshman year because they were doing things that just was not who I wanted to be. I literally stepped away and had no friends for a period of time. Like that was really uncomfortable, but not as uncomfortable as staying with that.
Right. Interesting.
So call yourself out on the illogical thoughts. When you're hanging out with that toxic friend because you're too uncomfortable to say, sorry, I'm blocking you. Right. Think about what's more uncomfortable, that short conversation and getting rid of them or continuing to be associated with their toxicity. Flip it.
Those words have never been spoken.
But it's normal. We all do it. And it's so illogical, but that's why I find our minds fascinating.
Yes. So how did you get into like the leadership and energy coaching that you're doing now?
Well, as you can see, this has been a lifelong interest for me. And I dove into studying transformation and self-development a little bit more in like a structured way, not just from life, in about 2008. And so the whole time I was running my animal hospital, I was going to all these weekends and taking all these courses, and I would come back and our staff meetings were like, all right, what did you learn this weekend? And I'm like, let's talk about integrity. Let's talk about, and over time I would coach my employees and, just in conversations. So after I sold my practice, I decided I still do some per diem medical work, but for the most part, I've shifted gears and I went back and took all of my experience as an entrepreneur, as a leader in life, and everything I had studied. And I went and found a coach training program that was a perfect integration of all of that. And I got multiple credentials, which I won't go into all of it now. But yeah, and decided to just bring to others what has helped me, because I won't go into the details, but I can tell you there were multiple times along the way in owning my animal hospital, I completely burned out. Times when I questioned whether or not I should be living. Times I was crumpled up on my kitchen floor in a heap, like just not wanting to get up. I mean, veterinary medicine can be a rough road, but a lot of things are a rough road, and all of that is normal. But if I did not have all of the tools and awareness and my coach I worked with at the time to help me get up and keep going and learn and grow and see these as opportunities for learning and growth, I don't know where I would be. And so I guess I'm just at a place in my life now where when I can bring that forth to others, and, leadership is not just a position, a job title, it's leading your life, it's leading your family, it's leading anytime you're in a position of influencing another person in any way, you're a leader. You could be with 4 friends at the mall. You might be a leader when you're like, hey guys, come on, this is enough. It's time we got to go and meet your mom. Like, you're being a leader in that moment.
Wow.
And when we bring conscious leadership is my passion, because when we bring consciousness, awareness to that, and we start to affect in great ways how we influence others, the outcomes we produce, the kindness, the impact in the world. So for me, if I can help others to do that, then hopefully leaving my mark on the world.
Yeah, it's like paying it forward, right? You can take the experiences as awful and amazing as they were, and you can show there's a path through, and the path is not straight. It's circuitous no matter what. Yeah.
It's so impactful. And the one last thought is like everybody, no matter where you're at, no matter what you're feeling, it's like everybody is learning and growing and bringing grace to yourself, and just the transformations that I've seen in people. One client I'm thinking of in particular, she was just so distraught. She felt so helpless and powerless in communicating with her team. And it's like she's like a completely different person now. And it's not that there was something wrong with her. It's just that she didn't know what she didn't know. And our minds are not designed always to see this. This is why we go to other coaches or therapists or
Right.
whatever, to let other people be that mirror. But it's all possible. No matter how awful you feel in any moment, it's a moment, and a better life, feeling better, happiness is possible. I just can't emphasize that enough.
Oh. So if people are interested in connecting with you, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
So I would say my website, drjenniferedwards.com, and it's doctor with a DR. I'm also on LinkedIn at Dr. Jennifer Edwards. I'm on all the social platforms, YouTube, Facebook, all the same. I love to have conversations, and I do private coaching. I also work with businesses and teams to help cultivate conscious leadership in teams, conscious leadership in leaders, and would love to speak with anybody who would like to.
Excellent. And if you could share your advice for a teenager who maybe resonates with any part of your story, what advice would you give them?
Well, some of it I already mentioned, of like just really focusing and learning. Drop the judgment on yourself. You're not an idiot because you didn't, know, or you didn't make the right choice. Drop the judgment and learn. And I tell this to my daughter all the time. Please, please, please know that anything you are experiencing right now at home, with friends, at school, in yourself, is their circumstances. If you imagine ocean waves, the circumstances are floating along in the waves on the top. Who you are really is underneath. All of the circumstances that are there right now are going to change. Maybe some better, maybe some worse, but nothing, impermanence is the one thing. Nothing will stay the same. So just never forget that, because sometimes we can be in situations where we give up or we think it's hopeless. And I just really always want people to remember, no matter how it feels, it's temporary. You have the power to change it. And if you don't see that, just know it will change. I had an awful thing when I was in 7th grade. It was awful, awful. Everybody hated me for a year. I was miserable. And do you think at my age now I care? No, I don't care. I laugh about it, right? So I think the one thing for teenagers I would love to just drive home is talk to somebody and just know that no matter what, they're just circumstances and they will change.
Great advice. Thank you so much for your time today, Jennifer. So many great insights. And if you were listening, you got a little bit of coaching going on there. So it felt really good. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love this conversation.
Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.